Welcome back to another episode of Thinking That Matters. I'm Elizabeth Mahusay, your podcast host, and I am thrilled to welcome my friend, Michelle Feldker. And without further ado, give us who you are, what you do, a little bit about your background, and we'll launch in.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Michelle Feldker, and I am a communications and marketing professional. I actually work for the city of McKinney. My background is that I have done communications and marketing for private sector, public sector, and now I've been local government for the last 10 years.
So, okay, I'm just curious, because I don't know that I know this. Where did you go to college? Like, what degree did you get that prepared you for this career path?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Tulsa, and I went through the business school, which is a little bit unique for local government because a lot of people in local government do like communication and journalism.
Right.
But I actually did marketing through the business school.
Okay.
So I'm marketing, advertising. And so that's really where my career has been in branding.
Ah, okay. And what had you thinking, I want to go get a marketing degree?
Oh, gosh. Really from a young age, I always just knew that that's what I wanted.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
Which is really kind of unique because most of the time, like I know with my kids, like they didn't really know what they wanted to do for the longest time. But as long as I can remember, I always wanted to do that. I can't even tell you why. Just something I wanted to do. And I love it.
Well, okay, so why do you love it? Like, because I know you're very passionate about it. What makes you passionate about this space that you occupy?
I think I like the behavioral aspect of it, though a lot of people, they think advertising, they think people are trying to sell me something. But the way I look at it is I look at how people take information and how can I communicate to them in the best way that they're going to receive it and get the message that we're trying to communicate.
That's interesting. Okay, I just have to say, I was not anticipating you saying the behavioral aspect of it, but that's interesting. So the behavioral aspect of the person seeing the marketing, reading the message, is that what you mean, right?
Yeah, it's kind of all of it because we all interpret things so many different ways. So it's from how people interpret to how people use information. Like I really, really love like the whole aspect of that. And what does it take for me to be effective in trying to achieve you understanding the message that I'm trying to get across?
That's so good. Okay, what's been your hardest like message that, whether it's a project or from a company standpoint, to try to find a way to communicate it that people can understand it?
I would say for me, earlier in my career, because I worked for a construction tool company, and that was not, I had trouble relating, right?
Okay.
And so early in my career, what I realized is if someone could help me understand by either show me how they do it, or so I try to get in the shoes of what we're trying to achieve. My career hasn't been like in consumer goods just a little bit, but not too much. And so most of the time I'm like, okay, show me and what are we trying to communicate? And usually when I can understand it from that perspective, I try to think of, okay, well, what are all the things that I would want to know? And so when I can break it down like that, then most of the time I can communicate the message. Like I said, when I worked for the construction tool company, some of it just wasn't fun. And so by the time I transferred to a different career path at that particular time, it was like, okay, I'm ready to move on because that was just something that, it was hard for me to relate to every single day because I wasn't working on big buildings or, on cement or anything like that. So those were sometimes challenging because then I had to understand the benefit and I had to understand it into a community that was not relatable to me.
That's interesting that you're connecting, and please correct me, but I'm hearing the connection between job satisfaction, right? Because you love marketing. Mm-hmm. So you were doing what you love, but the relatability piece was impacting the job, overall job satisfaction. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it's fair because like I really loved the company that I worked for and all that kind of stuff. But over time, it just got harder for me to really continue
to relate. Or maybe the fact that when someone isn't relating, it's like the gap feels like it gets bigger.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because I think sometimes the gap can narrow or the gap can widen. But what I'm hearing is that the gap matters. The relatability.
Gap, it does matter to me. And so like now, if I were to look at different industries or field or whatever, I'm like, that doesn't interest me. So though the principles are pretty much the same no matter where I take it, right? But if it's an industry that just does not appeal to me, then that's not an industry that I really want to work in or work for because it just is a stronger or a wider gap that I have to try to fulfill. Yeah. And that's not.
I'm totally relating to what you're saying because I think about with my husband's photography business, photography is a very creative art, just like marketing is very much creative. Communication is creative. Even as a writer myself, I mean, that's a creative element.
Absolutely.
But with Fred, like for him, one of the ways that I would relate to this is he has no desire at all to photograph babies. Like none. I mean, the thought of like infant or baby photography, and I want you to know, we did it once. And he was like, I'm never doing that again. We started, basically referring anyone who came to us to someone who specialized in baby photography.
Yeah.
Because it brought him no joy.
Yeah.
Truthfully. And that sounds terrible because you think babies are so cute. But that's how I relate to what you're saying, that the principles of photography are the same. What you do with the camera settings, all of that is the same. But there's a certain amount of relatability or interest or joy that you just get from it that matters.
Yes, absolutely. It matters.
So tell me, when you think about the fact that you're in this space, you're communicating messages, and you're also passionate about it. What do you believe helps you to be passionate about this space of communicating and marketing?
I think it has to do with, I'm really passionate about people. Like I love learning about people and things. And so I love being able to take different messages and be able to relate it to people. And so there's that whole behavioral aspect of that. So that's really exciting. And then also another thing is the messages that I communicate vary from day to day, from hour to hour. And so that keeps it fun and exciting on top of that.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So there's a lot of variety in
the fact that there are shifts and changes, really, it keeps it interesting. Is that a fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have to imagine that it keeps you on your toes, because you can't in marketing, I don't have a degree in it. I know it only from my own business and Fred's business, that if you land in cookie cutter marketing land, it's not landing.
Right. Because the whole idea is you have to stand out, especially when you're trying to sell a product, right? Like it is a little bit different if I'm just communicating a message, but still my message has to stand out about all the different messages that you're getting. And you get more than 10,000 messages a day, with all the different, with all the digital things and everything. I mean, the amount of messages that we get keep on expanding. And so my job is to cut through that clutter and for my message that I need you to pay attention to stand out. And so that's can be really, really challenging. And when you have to do that every single day, especially working for a local government, because our messaging are so, there's a variety of messages that we have to communicate. So on that aspect of it, it's a little bit different than this is just my business and I have this one main service or product that I have to, though you still have to communicate that in a variety of different ways because you're trying to reach so many different people.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, and I would say, at least in a municipality, like government space, the messaging carries different weight oftentimes. And there's so many factors that you have to be mindful of where that's concerned. So I can imagine that adds a whole nother element of challenge to the job.
Yes, it does. But I will say, for me, even when I was in the private sector, there was still a lot of challenges and a lot of things. I mean, because you are working for a company and they have stakeholders. And so it just kind of changes a little bit, but
the dynamics change, the people change. But again, like you said, the principles are the same. Mm-hmm. But what I just want to pull it out again, because I do think it's very important. You're lessening or reducing that gap, through relatability really does matter, because it assists you in how you approach the messaging, the creativity you bring to it, and the joy that it brings you when it's successful.
Absolutely. And for me, that's building relationships. And not everyone approaches it, in that manner. But for me, I approach building a relationship to understand and then being able to communicate. So though, I'm not building a relationship with the person that I'm ultimately communicating to, right? Because that's the masses. But I'm building a relationship with the others who are the content owners. And they help me understand. And the stronger I feel like those relationships can be, then I can usually be more successful in my messaging.
Okay, that's true. So that brings to mind something that I perceive potentially as a limiting belief, but let's explore it. When you talk about building the relationship with the person for whom you are trying to capture and understand what the messaging is and needs to be so that you can then push it out to the masses, what would you say is the hardest part of the development of that relationship?
The hardest part of developing those relationships typically is, I'd say typically building trust, because especially in those situations, because sometimes I don't have a lot of time to build a relationship. Like if a message has to go out, then I have to build that relationship and build that trust really fast. And so trust takes time to build, right? And a lot of times they're the experts of the knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. And so, balancing, well, yes, you're the expert, but then I'm the professional in the communication of it, right? And so really leaning into both of those and helping each other understand that we're both coming to the table with our expertise. It's just how we package it may look a little bit different, and helping each other understand what that's going to look like. And sometimes that has to happen really fast.
I can imagine. Because what I was thinking is, specifically, whether it's a content expert, like a equipment expert, like your tool people, right? I mean, that minimized that so much that I didn't mean it that way. But in that particular job, I think about, they have in their mind all of this expertise. There are so many things that are automatic in the way they think, the way they process, that you've got to be able to understand what's up here, and you've got to be able to pull it out so that you're able to communicate it to other people and they can grab hold of it. Because I think that to me is part of what is one of the biggest struggles just in communication, period, is that there's a disconnect between the content or product expert and the communication that is going out. Speak to that for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much jargon and all sorts of
alphabet
things.
soup, as I call it.
Yes, exactly. Preconceived notions that we have in our heads. And then again, with this amount of messaging that we're getting on a daily basis, that's all hitting us. And so trying to communicate with someone like a content expert and making sure that it's like, okay, what is the essential thing that we have to communicate and breaking it down to the lowest level so that people can understand. And sometimes that could take a lot of work, right? And then another thing is when you're in an industry for a while, then you start to understand all that. And so checking yourself to make sure, like, am I breaking it down enough? Or do I have so much knowledge now that I'm not being as effective as I could be in being able to communicate to everyone?
Man, what I'm hearing there is that for you as a marketing communication professional, you still need to bring a mindset of humility to your job on an ongoing basis, especially when you've worked in the same industry for a long time.
Absolutely.
To me, that's the difference between whether it would be called this or not, but that's a growth mindset, right? That I'm humble enough to know that no matter how much I know, there may still be more that I need to know, or there may be a better way of communicating it versus the fixed mindset of, either I don't need it or I know enough, or, and that can be a challenging place to be in communications.
Yeah, absolutely. And the growth mindset is really important because especially when you're managing others or you become a certain amount of a content expert yourself, right? When you're trying to mentor and grow others. And so making sure that you're balancing, sometimes I have to check myself to make sure it's like, oh, do I have too much knowledge, especially on a message or whatever? And so I have to say, okay, I'm too close to this. And realizing when I'm too close to something and saying, okay, I need someone else to look at this because maybe I'm too close to this. And so balancing that, especially when you're, like I said, when you're training or mentoring others, making sure that you're also trying to kind of teach that, but then they're coming to you expecting you to have the answers, right? So, yeah.
That's, I mean, I'm just thinking about the complexity of that layer that you just added, right? Because in the same way, let me see if I can verbalize this. In the same way that you're going to the expert, right, of the person that you need to build a relationship with in order to communicate out to the masses what they know, you as a person who manages other people on your team, you in effect become that person, right? And they're coming to you as the expert, and they might not be prepared or understand how to ask you the questions, how to get it out of your head and onto the table for them to be able to consume it and then know what to do with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that's that. And then I start thinking about, the words, the images, all of the other pieces that go with this. I mean, that I could really see where it does bring I don't know, it's given me a fresh perspective on the complexity of this marketing communications space.
And a lot of times the amount of time that you have to work on these messages or this communication, you have so much coming at you. So trying to remember all of that and do everyone justice, right? That adds a whole nother level of complexity. I mean, we all have challenges in our jobs and trying to juggle a lot, but it just really makes it complicated or challenging on a day-to-day to make sure that you're staying in that lane.
Thinking about, it just occurred to me that people are going to listen to this podcast and they're going to, if I don't ask you this question, they're going to be, I can't believe you had a marketing and communication specialist on the show and I didn't ask you about AI.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So as someone who this is your profession, and I know you're very passionate about it and you're very good at it, speak to what's happening with artificial intelligence. And when I think about 10,000 messages a day that we're exposed to, and truthfully, when I get onto social media, the amount I'm like, that was written by AI. They're just key indicators on it. And I don't know, speak to it. I'll stop talking.
Yeah. So I'm going to say something that's going to be controversial. I love AI. but I love AI for a certain purpose, okay? I love AI in that it can help me move through processes faster, but
I 100% agree with you.
yes, but I don't use it to replace anything that I have people doing, meaning I don't use it to make graphics for me. Now, will I use it occasionally to help me come up with a concept? An idea? Yes. So that way I can have a visual to show, like maybe my graphic designer or something like that. So I do feel like AI has a place. I think some people have taken the human aspect out of it and said that it can replace, and I don't believe that. I believe that's when you're finding a lot of similarities and a lot of telltale things that you are seeing on social media. People are using it in a way to say, oh, well, we can do this faster. But it doesn't, just because you can use it in that manner, it doesn't mean that it's great.
Yeah.
And that it's going to achieve the results long term that you want. That's still out there to be seen. But so I love it for its purpose, for a purpose, but I have lots of guidelines on how to use it. And like I said, mainly it's more of to help me refine my thinking and helping with some concepting and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, I'm always feeding it, like, here's my ideas. Okay, help me think through this.
And I'm sure with your role, you probably have an enterprise, more protected,
Absolutely.
not going out into the think tank of the world.
Right.
And that's the other piece of it as well. I'm with you. I have found some really good usages of AI. A case in point, Fred and I were working on refining value statements for one of our businesses. And because I've fed multiple prompts and I've had it, I've used it to think through different problems and approaches and, to your point, processes. I literally was able to go from everything that I've worked on here, provide for me a short list of what would be perceived values of what we do. I was amazed at fairly how spot on it was. Mm-hmm. Now you take that, and then I was like, okay, Fred, what do you think about this? And we were walking ourselves through it. But I think, to your point, there's some great ways to use it that can be very impactful.
Yes.
I think we do want to guard ourselves of that we just all end up sounding alike.
Yes.
And there are certain phrases and things that it's just, I kind of crack up sometimes when I see certain phrases and where I'm just like, okay, that was probably written by AI,
And, in some cases I'm like, okay, that's okay. That doesn't matter that much, but I always try to put a human aspect back into it. One of the ways that I'm actually using it right now is we have a project, and my graphic designer hasn't done this project before, and I'm not using it to replace any of her skills, but I'm using it to help me understand of how I can help coach her on how we can actually accomplish this. And it deals with like an Excel spreadsheet and all these things that I know how to use Excel and stuff, but it's been a long time since I've had to build like really in-depth formulas and all that kind of stuff. And so it is helping me. I'm able to ask questions of like, okay, how does it? And so it's helping me build out what we need. And then hopefully tomorrow we get to test it. We've tested a little bit. And so far, some things have worked well and some things haven't. But it's helping us walk through a process that I believe eventually there's a few projects that will be able to take what we've learned from this and be able to do some of our work a little bit better and faster than what we're able to do today. But we're not changing a process. We're using it as an educational tool to help me.
Oh, I know. And I love that. And I think really AI is another example of embracing it and finding the appropriate uses for it. That is the growth mindset approach that we need versus the fixed, I'm never going to use it, I don't like it, all of the doomsday a thought process around it.
Right.
It's really learning how to be mindful with a growth mindset where that is concerned. Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to when you talked about you're passionate about people. In one of our conversations, you also added about your passion around advocacy. I'd love for you to speak to that.
Yes. So, as an early age, I think this is changing, but I know as an early age, I was taught like you just kind of accept things. Like you work hard, you do, but if someone tells you no, then that was kind of the answer. But when I was raising my kids, I'm not done raising my kids, but when they were younger, my oldest child needed more out of the school system than was being offered. And I became very passionate about, I'm going to see what I can do for my child. And that opened my eyes in a lot of different ways. And I started very professionally by working my way up through the school district where we were at the time and asking questions of like, you say your purpose and mission is to serve every child, but my child is not being serviced. So what are our options? And so through that, we were able to test things that they had never tested before and use tools that they had, but they hadn't used them in the manner that we were saying, hey, this potentially could be an option. And so that really opened my eyes to making sure that really just start questioning more and advocating in a professional way, like, do we have choices? Do we have options? And I've done that for both of my kids. And then even in the workforce, I mentor my own employees to let's explore options like that. Like we're our own advocates. And there's been times where I've looked at things and I'm going, why did I not advocate for myself? Like, why did I just accept that as that would be the answer? Later to find out that if I would have asked or if I would have questioned something in a very professional way, the outcome probably could have been different. But I accepted what was told of me versus just exploring it a little bit more.
It reminds me of you have not because you ask not.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so there's some key things I want to just maybe pin of what you said that I think is very important about advocacy in the way that you're describing it. One, that you mentioned on multiple occasions doing so in a professional way,
yes.
Right? Which means we're honoring, we're respecting. We are not the bull in the china shop, right?
Right, exactly.
I think that's very important.
That's key.
I love how you addressed directly, I'm sure respectfully, but you addressed directly, these are what you say are your vision, your values, but my child is not being provided the service needed. And then you offered a great open-ended question, what are our options?
Yes.
And that gives space for exploration, right? When we ask questions like that. And I just think that's incredibly important, whether we're advocating for our child, in your case of that example, or we're advocating for ourselves. Do you know, I heard a statistic. Well, you heard it with me. We were at the women's conference last fall, and the gal who was sharing the data was saying that one of the big reasons why women executives get paid less than men executives is they don't ask for more money. They don't negotiate for a higher salary, whereas for men, that's like a very common thing.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that's self-advocacy where that is concerned. So I think that's incredibly important. And also attaching that to what you said, because I think it's meaningful for me, is that we do it in an honoring, a respectful, a professional way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think we are able to do that in a way. And it also models well for our children that it's important to advocate and to do so in a way that is professional.
Absolutely.
Where that is concerned. Now, you also had mentioned to me, I had asked you about limiting beliefs earlier, and I feel like I don't want to end this conversation without asking you about it, because I think it is important. you had mentioned this whole phrase, taking a break from the career, and the limiting belief that you came back with. So let's address that so that we can help some of the people listening that maybe this is part of their reality.
So I went out of the workforce, I will say what people perceive going out of the workforce, for 11 years. And during that time, I was raising my kids, but I did stuff like, I advocated, I worked, volunteered in nonprofits. I did contracting work, all that kind of stuff. And so in my mind, I was still working. I was still, in some ways, I was developing skills that I hadn't developed in the workforce, right?
That's a great point.
I continued having leadership opportunities and growing and all that kind of stuff. But when I decided to come back into what we'd say traditional workforce, so many people told me like, oh, you can't really start where you left. And I believed them. And ever since I did, and I have been successful in my own right, and I'm very proud of that. But one of the things when I've worked with others who maybe been in those situations, or when I've seen others coming back into the workforce, having to take a break or whatever, those are some of the best employees. And we don't necessarily treat them with the same level of respect. I mean, I did flat out have people tell me like, well, I wouldn't consider you for that job because you've been out for so many years. And it's like, well, I didn't forget how to do things. So,
yeah,
but anyway, so yeah, that's been a limiting belief that I've had to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important. So I want you to think, the person listening, they have, whether they've chosen to step out of, we're going to call it traditional workforce, or they've had to step out of traditional workforce for a variety of reasons. It could be caregiving, it could be their own health, it could be a number of different reasons why. How would you encourage them to self-advocate when they go back into the traditional workforce?
Wow, that's a really good question. One, I would say really think about your skills that you worked on.
I was going to say, you said that. I'm like, that is developing skills while you were raising your children, but you were involved in other things. I mean, that's a great aspect of advocating for oneself.
Yeah. And I really think when I was hired back in the workforce, me doing some of those things, that's really what helped get me my job at the time. I do believe, I just think I started looking at a lower level within the workforce.
Okay.
And so anyway, so I would definitely say, make sure that you're keeping track of what are those skills, those transferable skills that will make you marketable and help you really step into the next phase of your life. And another thing is, just because you left one career doesn't mean you can't go into another career. So
True.
Being open-minded and really taking a look at what are those transferable skills that you have, that's where AI can help you that we didn't have years ago.
So
right?
true.
So putting that in and maybe taking a look at different areas and then advocating for yourself in those areas of why you should.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think such an encouragement. I mean, I chose to go home to raise children. And, I do believe that there is a prevailing limiting belief that often is imposed on people that, you've been out so long, you can't, or you shouldn't, or you're not capable, whatever words go along with it. And it is important that we do not buy in to that as a limiting belief, and instead, to your point, focus on what skills have you worked on, what are transferable, and also just being open-minded to maybe it's a slight shift in career.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Where you're still utilizing all of your skills, your abilities, your development, but it may look differently than where you were before.
Yeah. And just being open to that.
Yeah. That is so good. Well, I have so enjoyed our conversation, and just such a wonderful, really, journey we've been on, just talking through with you. So the whole podcast is around thinking that matters. I really desire for people to think better. So I ask every guest, why do you believe it's important to cultivate thinking that matters? How would you respond to that?
I think that's so important because I think our beliefs and our thinking can evolve and change over time. But we have to be open to that. And so we can't be in that fixed mindset. We have to be willing to grow. And I think when you can foster those thoughts and that thinking that allows you to grow, that just keeps you in a space that keeps you open to explore possibilities. And then it also makes it where you can defy some of those belief systems that maybe were instilled in you and you just didn't realize that aren't true.
That's so good. You said foster the thinking that allows you to grow, which makes you more likely to be open to exploring possibilities. I love that. I love that so much because I think that people feel so stuck oftentimes because they're not connecting it to how they're thinking.
Right.
And so I love how you articulated that. And so it just reminds me why it is important to cultivate thinking that matters, right? So that we foster thinking, growth-minded thinking that allows us to be open to possibilities. And here's what I know. When we have an openness to possibilities, then we are able to connect with people that we might not otherwise have connected with, right?
Absolutely.
We can grow individually in ways that we might not have thought possible, to use your word. And in then doing so, we have opportunities to impact people in incredibly positive ways. I love it. All right. So I want to encourage you, the listener, like and subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a review. It allows us to have a greater reach. And if you connected to this episode via a social media platform, like it, comment one thing you got from it, and share it so that other people are able to benefit from it. Michelle, thank you so much for our time today. I'm so grateful to have you on the show.